on October 5th, 2019, a dog walker called police at around 7:43 am after discovering what they believed to be human remains in woodland off Chadwell Road in Stevenage. By October 10th, the body was formally confirmed to be Joy's. Tragically, a post-mortem carried out 2 days before that couldn't determine a clear cause of death, so further tests were ordered. In December 2018, 20-year-old midwifery student Joy Morgan went missing after attending a celebratory dinner with her local church group, Israel United in Christ, IUIC. 6 weeks passed before she was reported missing, but by then, it was too late. 6 months later, fellow churchgoer chauffeur El Israel was sentenced to life for her murder, yet the location of her body remained a mystery. In this episode of British Murders with Stuart Blues, I explore one of London's most harrowing cases, a story that touches on race, a controversial religious group, and the devastating impact of a lack of accountability on a grieving family still searching for answers. Before we dive into Joy's story, a quick favour. If you enjoy this kind of content, hit that subscribe button. It's a zero-cost way to support the channel, and it really helps it reach more people who are interested in true crime. Joy Morgan was born on February 12, 1998, and was actually premature. She arrived in the world 7 weeks early. Even so, she was full of fight from the start. She grew up in Battersea, down in southwest London, where her mum Carol raised her and her siblings. Joy's mum Carol was a care worker. We're talking 12, sometimes 15-hour shifts. Money was tight, but Carol made sure her kids never went without love or attention. She treasured their little family moments, days at Battersea Park, cooking together, those simple but special things that stick in your memory as a kid. When Carol talks about her daughter, you can hear how much Joy was loved. She would buy sweeties, Christmas presents, she'd remember me, take photographs, cook dinner for me. She was just lovely, an all-around superstar in my eyes. Those are the words of Carol. Joy was right in the middle of 4 kids, the classic peacemaker spot, and her family affectionately called her Joy Joy, because, well, she really did live up to her name. Carol described her as lovely, over the top, sometimes irritating, beautiful, compassionate, and caring. You get the sense that Joy was one of those people who not only lit up the room, but could also get on your nerves, as teenagers tend to do, in that affectionate sibling sort of way. She loved sewing, cooking, and keeping everyone in line. Education was also big for her. She'd nag at her cousins, her brother, her sisters to do the best they could in school and try and make something of themselves. She was the type to say, "Come on, you can do better than that." But it was always out of love, never criticism. Joy believed in pushing yourself and making the most of what you had. She had a little saying that she liked to use. I love this. Consistency causes change. For someone so young, that's a very powerful mindset. So it didn't surprise anyone when Joy said she wanted to become a midwife. It suited her perfectly. Helping people, supporting them, caring for them. It seemed to be her destiny. She was a student midwife at the University of Hertfordshire, thoroughly enjoying her course and already talking about her future hospital placement in the new year. Carol said she was a natural, the sort of person who would have made an incredible midwife. Someone calm, kind and warm. Someone you'd picture as being the ideal person when going through those various stages of pregnancy. She imagined Joy travelling the world once she'd qualified, sending postcards home from Africa, helping people wherever she went. Her friends and family all described her in the same way. Affable, loving, caring, focused and determined. Joy wasn't just studying midwifery. She wanted to go further, to become a doctor one day. She had that drive in her, that spark. At just 20 years old, her life was really starting to take shape. She was independent, thriving at university, and by all accounts, happy. While in the midst of her midwifery course, Joy found herself drawn toward religion, specifically an organisation called Israel United in Christ, IUIC for short. She'd been a member since her late teens, joining in roughly January 2017, so she'd have been 17 going on 18. Now, I'll be honest, When I first started researching this case, I hadn't even heard of IUIC before. Maybe you're the same. So I did what anyone would do in that situation and went straight to their website, israelunite.org, to see what they're all about. Usually when you click on a website, you're greeted with a pop-up to join a newsletter, or you want to accept or reject the cookies. But in this case, something far different appeared. A legal notice titled in big capital letters, Demand for Retraction and Warning Against Defamation. In short, it says that the publication of any defamatory statements about IUIC will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I found that quite interesting. And for the record, IUIC's legal department, everything I'm about to mention about your organization's history comes directly from your website and YouTube channels. For anything else, I'll point listeners toward publicly available sources. IUIC was founded in 2003 by a man who goes by Bishop Nathaniel Israel, who started out teaching the Bible from his basement in Coney Island in New York. As his following grew, the classes got too big for his home. So he moved into a small building in Brooklyn, and that became IUIC's first official school. According to the group's own About page, Israel United in Christ is, and I'm quoting here, a Bible-based organization dedicated to gathering the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They identify as so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native American Indians. They believe these communities are the true descendants of the biblical Israelites, and their mission is to educate, empower, and restore them through study of the Bible and understanding their heritage. If you want to dig deeper into their beliefs, there's plenty of information on their website. I definitely encourage you to go and give it a read if you want to learn more. By 2012, IUIC had opened a branch, or camp as they call them, here in the UK, first in London and then another in the West Midlands. They positioned themselves as a place for Black British people to find spiritual identity and empowerment in a society they viewed as oppressive. When Joy joined in 2016, there were roughly 140 members between those two UK branches. And her mum believes her path toward IUIC might have been influenced by a few difficult years. And when I say difficult, I'm really being light with the terminology there. She went through a lot, did Joy. To start with, her mum Carol has multiple sclerosis, or MS. Joy's uncle Prince, who she was close to, died of cancer in 2006. Then her stepdad, Carol's partner of 32 years, also passed away from cancer in 2012. Just 2 years after that, her biological father took his own life. That was in 2014. That's a huge amount of loss for anyone to experience, let alone a teenager. Friends and family said she began turning inward after that, becoming more private and withdrawn. She came across IUIC online not long after her dad's death through their many YouTube videos. At first, she was researching conspiracy theories and videos about the Illuminati, the sort of stuff the algorithm loves to throw at people. Then, one day, one of the recommended videos was from IUIC Atlanta camp, and that one, as she put it herself, blew her mind. She started watching more and more of their content, often late into the night. Carol said she'd hear the voices coming from Joy's room in the early hours of the morning. At first, Joy used her mum's laptop, but when Carol heard what she was listening to, she took it away. That caused a lot of tension in the house, and Joy ended up buying her own laptop, carrying on as before, and ultimately ended up moving out. She was 18, legally an adult, so what could Carol realistically do? Joy officially joined IUIC around that same time. For a while, she didn't have a stable place to live. Technically, she was homeless, but she was later rehoused by the council before moving into student accommodation once she started university. Her relationship with her family became incredibly strained after that. Carol later said, "The moment she started getting more and more into the church, it was unbearable. She'd make you feel like you were diseased. We were excommunicated in our own home. She wouldn't talk to us." Joy's sister Dion told BBC's Newsbeat that Joy's behaviour changed dramatically. She said Joy sometimes targeted her and her younger sister because they were mixed race. even resorting to calling the youngest a white devil. For balance, IUIC have said that claims they encourage members to cut off their families are lies. Regardless, Joy started referring to IUIC as her family instead. She went by Sister Joy, as all the women in the group do. The men, by comparison, are called brothers, and Joy threw herself into it completely. She ran the children's group, rarely missed a Sabbath service or one of their festivals, and spoke passionately about her beliefs. In one video, recorded just a couple of weeks before she disappeared, quoted her favourite scripture. It was John chapter 6 verses 67 to 69. She smiled as she read it aloud. She said IUIC was the best family she'd ever had. And from what I can tell, IUIC has quite a structured hierarchy. Bishop Nathaniel is at the top. Then below are deacons, captains, officers, soldiers, and brothers in descending order. The women don't hold ranks. They're simply referred to as sisters. Joy once said her turning point came when she learned that, according to IUIC's teachings, Christ was a black man. She said she'd never considered that before. But once she'd heard it, it changed everything for her. It made her feel like the Bible was speaking directly to her. IUIC has a massive presence online, by the way. One of their YouTube channels, IUIC in the Classroom, has around 188,000 subscribers at the time of writing. So they've got a large platform and a devoted audience. While looking through some of their older content, I came across a 6-part series from 2018 titled, Why Do White People Hate Black People? That stood out to me, especially since their newer videos now begin with a disclaimer reading, "We are not a hate group." That is likely in response to the Southern Poverty Law Center, an American organization that monitors extremist movements, listing them as such a group. I will admit I didn't watch the full series, so I can't comment on what's said in it, but it did seem like an interesting contrast between their past and present messaging. One last thing that caught my eye was this. On their main website, there's a section labeled DOS(women), which links to another site called thedaughtersofsarah.com. There's a quiz on there titled How Obedient Are You?, which talks about biblical obedience and ends with a little score sheet that ranks you. It goes from 10s towards disobedience on the low end to exceptionally obedient at the top. I don't know if Joy ever completed that quiz, but given how deeply involved she became, it's something that does make you wonder. By 2018, IUIC had become the centre of Joy's world. She was still that same bright, determined young woman, but her life had changed completely. Her beliefs, her friendships, even her family connections. By the end of 2018, Joy was living in a shared flat on Aviation Way in Hatfield, Hertfordshire. It was around that time, Boxing Day 2018, that Joy attended a special dinner held by a church. The Ilford branch, which is in East London, was a regular congregation, and that evening's event was a celebratory one, a way of thanking members like Joy for all their work and dedication throughout the year. But people who were in attendance later said Joy didn't quite seem herself that night. She looked upset, distracted even. No one could have known it then, but that would be the last time anyone would ever see Joy Morgan alive other than her killer. Meanwhile, back in Battersea, her mum Carol was at home with her other 3 children, Dion, Earl and Shona. Christmas Day had come and gone, and Joy hadn't been there. In fact, Carol hadn't physically seen her daughter since September, 3 months earlier. She'd phoned Joy on Christmas Day, trying her best to convince her to come to the family's Boxing Day celebration at her sister's house. She even offered to pay for a taxi for her, but Joy said no, and there's a theory about why. IUIC reportedly teaches that black people should leave the Christian church, and given Christmas is very much a Christian tradition, it's likely that Joy's decision was influenced by her faith. And that idea isn't just pulled from thin air. IUIC has videos online with titles like Black People Must Leave the Christian Church and Christmas is Full of Idolatry and Lies. Let this be the night you decide to repent and return to the keeping of God's commandments. I also stumbled across an old IUIC pamphlet from 2011 titled Christmas Has Nothing to Do with God or Jesus Christ. It finishes with the line, Christmas and all of its attributes are enveloped in philosophies and vain deceit. It's a tradition of men that cannot be found in the Bible. So, It seems fair to say that Joy wasn't just declining a family get-together. She was following what she believed to be a biblical instruction. It's sad to think that while a family were gathered in Battersea, sharing food and laughter, Joy was at that Boxing Day event in Ilford, surrounded by people she called her new family, and just hours later, she vanished. By early February 2019, more than 6 weeks had passed since anyone had seen or heard from Joy. Nobody from her church had reported her missing. Not a single call was made to the police, not even to her mum. Speaking of which, it was actually a call from Joy's estate agent to her mum that set alarm bells ringing. They told Carol that her daughter hadn't paid her rent and that her housemates hadn't seen her since Christmas. Immediately, Carol's stomach dropped, and she called the police that same day, February 7th, to report Joy as missing. Officers spoke to Joy's housemates, who told them she was a regular member of the IUIC. From there, they managed to get contact details for some of the congregation via Joy's landlord and began making phone calls. One of the people they reached out to was a 40-year-old man named Chauffeur El Israel, though that wasn't the name he was born with. Originally from Nigeria, he'd moved to the UK in 1997 and had joined the church in 2016 after being introduced to it by his wife. His birth name was Ajibola Shogbamimu, and according to reports, he'd legally changed it by deed poll in 2018, something encouraged within IUIC. Shofar means a ram's horn, an ancient musical instrument, which church members said suited him for his loud, booming voice. Israel was well liked among the congregation and had risen to the rank of soldier, though that status hadn't been without controversy. On one occasion, he'd been demoted after interrupting a senior leader mid-speech and reacting angrily when corrected. At the time, Israel lived with his wife in a flat on Fordwich Road in Cricklewood, North London. The couple also had another rented home in Luton, Bedfordshire, but it was at that Cricklewood property that police attention soon began to focus. On February 9th, just 2 days after Carol's missing person report, officers pulled over a distinctive red Honda with a black roof and bonnet on the hard shoulder of the M25 near Junction 22. Behind the wheel was Israel, who was swiftly arrested on suspicion of Joy's murder. Police already knew that he'd been the last person seen with her. He'd admitted giving Joy a lift home from the Boxing Day dinner at the church, and there was even video footage from that night which showed Joy smiling, dancing and laughing, full of energy, with Israel also visible in the background. At the end of the evening, she was seen getting into his car. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When detectives began piecing together the data, her phone and his told a worrying story. Both devices had pinged off the same cell tower in Cricklewood for 2 nights straight after Boxing Day, nowhere near Joy's flat in Hatfield. When confronted, Israel changed his story. He admitted that, yes, Joy had come back to his flat, but insisted she'd simply stayed on the sofa because she was upset and thinking about leaving the church after watching ex-IUIC members online explaining why they'd left. His wife, he said, was staying at their other property in Luton. The reason I didn't bring it up before, he told police, was because of my wife and people getting the wrong idea. You see, within IUIC, sex before marriage and adultery are forbidden. Men and women aren't even supposed to be alone together if they aren't husband and wife, and they sit separately during services. Israel claimed he and Joy simply watched YouTube videos for 2 days before he dropped her back at her place on December 28th. He described her as being like a daughter to him, and denied anything sexual had taken place. After 2 days of questioning, he was released on bail while police continued their inquiries. On what would have been Joy's 21st birthday, February 12, 2019, her family made a heartbreaking public appeal. We love you. We miss you. Wherever you are, text or call so that we know you are all right. It doesn't matter what has happened. Just come home. By then, detectives had already confirmed Joy's bank cards and mobile phone hadn't been used since Boxing Day, and she'd last spoken to her university friends on WhatsApp about coursework that was due on December 27. Her disappearance was now being treated as suspicious. Detective Chief Superintendent Thomas said Joy's disappearance was completely out of character, and that every line of inquiry so far had drawn a blank. She'd been working hard to complete a degree and had so much to look forward to. There was no reason for her to vanish. Police urged anyone that knew Joy or might have seen her since December 26 to come forward. They were especially keen to speak to anyone who'd seen that red Honda she was often a passenger in. Their search soon began to focus on Stevenage, around 15 miles north of Hatfield. Specialist teams and police dogs combed through woodland along the A602 near Hook's Cross, hoping for any trace of the missing student. Then, on February 27th, just 3 weeks after Carol reported Joy missing, Israel was charged with her murder. Still, he pleaded not guilty. That same day, a GoFundMe page appeared online, apparently set up by a member of IUIC to raise money in Joy's name. Many of the donations came from people affiliated with the church, and it raised just under roughly 17 grand when converted from US dollars, with the organisers claiming the funds would be transferred to a family member of Joy's once the target were met. The trial of Israel began on July 8, 2019 at Reading Crown Court. It was during that trial that the grim picture of what had really happened to Joy began to unfold. One detail that stood out to me was what happened on the evening of December 28th, just 2 days after the Boxing Day party. At around 7:30 p.m, Joy's phone number was suddenly removed from a church group chat on the app Telegram. Apparently, within IUIC, that's how someone signals they've left the organisation. They're simply deleted and forgotten about, as if they never existed. Other members tried calling Joy to see if she was okay, since she seemed happy enough before, but none of the calls went through. The next day, she didn't show up at church as she usually would, all but confirming her exit in their eyes. Around that same time, Israel's red Honda was picked up on cameras near Stevenage, and interestingly, Joy's phone also pinged in that same area. That coincidence didn't sit right with investigators, and for good reason. Over the next few days, Israel did what a lot of guilty people do. He pretended to be concerned. He called Joy several times and even went round to her house to check on her. It was all part of a cover-up designed to make it look like he had no idea where she'd gone. In reality, Joy's phone sent its final signal in the early hours of New Year's Day, again in the Stevenage area. And guess whose phone was right there with it? Israel's. When police later searched his red Honda, they made a chilling discovery. Joy's house keys were inside. By then, 7 weeks had passed since she'd last been seen alive. There was also evidence of a much more personal connection between the two. In a message from March 2018, Israel had written to Joy, calling her an amazing princess and a treasure that cannot be measured. It painted a very different picture from the mentor-like figure he'd tried to portray himself as. The jury weren't told about the flirtatious exchanges he'd had with other women before and after Joy's disappearance, but it was later revealed that he'd been using actual chat-up manuals, quoting them word for word in some messages. So, while he was standing in church preaching discipline and purity, behind the scenes, he was playing a very different game. On August 5th, after a 4-week trial, the jury of 8 men and 4 women found Israel guilty of Joy's murder. But even after the verdict, he refused to tell police where her body was. That silence, that refusal to let her family lay her to rest, made an already devastating situation even worse. Judge Michael Sewell handed him a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. During the sentencing, the judge told him, "Only you know the circumstances of your terrible deed and why you did it." The judge also accused him of a cruel and cowardly silence. After the trial, IUIC told the BBC that when Joy first went missing, all indications pointed to her leaving the church or wanting time away, not being in danger. They confirmed that Israel was no longer a member and that they don't comment on criticisms from ex-members. They also described his behaviour during the investigation and trial as nothing short of disgraceful and not in line with church principles. Calling it an isolated incident, they added, "Regardless, we want the world to know that we seek to follow the laws of the land when not conflicting with the laws of the Most High." By the Most High, they mean God. A month later, in September 2019, Carol went on BBC Radio 5 Live to speak out about the lack of media attention her daughter's case had received, and she didn't hold back. She praised the police, saying they did a fantastic, absolutely 100% job to find that man. But she didn't mince her words when it came to the press. "You failed the police because you did not promote my daughter," she said. Why is it you reporters fail to pick up the news of black people when it comes to them being missing? If my daughter had been out there with a knife, a gun, a weapon, I would have sat in my house and seen her on TV. But because my daughter was a university student from Hertfordshire, she was a nobody. It's an incredibly powerful statement, and one that honestly gave me pause. I'll be the first to admit, this sort of topic is new ground for me. I'm a white bloke from Yorkshire. I don't personally experience the kind of racial bias Carol's talking about, but her words made me curious. So I did some digging. I came across a 2023 report by the Ethical Journalism Network titled Challenges for Black Journalists in UK Newsrooms. It's a really eye-opening read. The report found that mainstream newsrooms in the UK are often unwelcoming places for black journalists, and that lack of diversity directly affects how stories are covered. The Independent also reported on it at the time, saying racism is commonplace in UK journalism and that there's a real need for more black people in senior editorial roles and more race correspondents to help ensure fairer, more balanced coverage. It does make you think, doesn't it? Would Joy's disappearance have made front-page headlines sooner if she'd been white? We can't know for sure, but Carol's frustration is completely understandable. Then, on October 5th, 2019, a dog walker called police at around 7:43 a.m. after discovering what they believe to be human remains in woodland off Chadwell Road in Stevenage. At first, a Hertfordshire police spokesman said it was too early to say whether the remains were Joy's, but confirmed it was a key line of inquiry. What's particularly heartbreaking is that the location where she was found was close to an area previously searched by officers months earlier. Detective Chief Inspector Jenkins later told the BBC that Joy's body wasn't missed during those earlier searches, suggesting that it may have been concealed or simply not visible at the time. By October 10th, the body was formally confirmed to be Joy's. Tragically, a post-mortem carried out 2 days before that couldn't determine a clear cause of death, so further tests were ordered. On October 17th, Joy was finally laid to rest, surrounded by her loving family, her proper family. Her white coffin, decorated with pink roses and engraved with the words "Joy to the World," was carried in a white horse-drawn carriage to Lambeth Crematorium in South London. Among those carrying her were her siblings Earl and Dion, while James Blunt's "You're Beautiful" played softly in the background. It was a service filled with emotion, grief, love, and the bittersweet relief that Joy had at last been brought home. The inquest into Joy's death took place in January 2021. Forensic pathologist Dr. Charlotte Randall told the court that toxicology tests had detected MDMA, more commonly known as ecstasy, in Joy's system. Interestingly, or perhaps disturbingly, the same drug had been found in Israel's car when he was arrested. The court heard that there was no evidence whatsoever that Joy, a devout member of her church, would have taken that drug voluntarily. Sadly, the advanced state of decomposition meant it was impossible to determine an exact cause of death. Dr. Randall said there were 3 minor bruises on Joy's limbs and no evidence of stabbing, shooting, restraint, or sexual assault. However, she did note a possible fracture to the hyoid bone, a small bone in the neck, though there was nothing to suggest sustained compression. There was also no sign of a major head injury, but Dr. Randall said Joy could have been rendered unconscious by a non-fatal blow to the head. She also couldn't rule out the possibility that Joy had been smothered, or that the ecstasy given to her by Israel had left her unconscious and vulnerable. In his conclusion, Coroner Geoffrey Sullivan said the exact cause of death could not be ascertained, but he was satisfied that Joy had been unlawfully killed, and that was the verdict he recorded: unlawful killing. For those who wish to hear IUIC's own perspective on this case, they uploaded a 4.5-hour live stream video to their main YouTube channel titled Addressing the Scoffers about Joy Morgan. Joy's story is one that leaves far more questions than answers. A bright, compassionate young woman whose faith and community should have been her sanctuary. Yet somehow that world became the place where her light was extinguished. The lack of a clear cause of death has made it difficult for a family to ever truly find peace. They've had to live with the knowledge that Joy's final moments may never be understood. All they know is that her life was taken far too soon, and in circumstances that no one should ever have to endure. Her mum has spent years campaigning for justice, trying to ensure that what happened to her daughter isn't forgotten or brushed aside. That determination, that love, speaks volumes about the bond Joy had with her family. And while Israel was convicted and jailed, the truth of exactly what happened in those final moments remains locked away, buried alongside the faith and trust Joy once placed in him. Her story reminds us that sometimes danger doesn't come from a stranger in the dark, but from the very people and places we believe will protect us. Thanks so much for watching this video. The channel is British Murders with Stuart Blues. Please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, cheerio.